Apostolic authority is rooted in spiritual discipline and inner alignment. This authority is not given by men, nor is it earned through status, titles, or recognition. It emerges from the deep connection between a person and the divine order. Apostles in ancient times were not merely messengers or preachers. They were those who embodied the very message they carried. Their lives were aligned with what they spoke, what they believed, and how they acted. This alignment wasn't a casual coincidence. It was forged through discipline, struggle, and unwavering commitment to spiritual principles. Spiritual discipline sharpens the soul the way a blade is sharpened on stone. Without this refining process, a person may carry words but not power, vision but not clarity, knowledge but not wisdom. The authority that commands attention in spiritual warfare arises not from shouting louder or displaying force, but from the unshakable stillness of a soul that has been tested and refined. The kind of authority that apostles carried was visible in the way they walked into chaos and brought peace, entered confusion and delivered truth, faced opposition and never bent. They weren't powerful because they wanted to be. They were powerful because they had learned to surrender. That surrender didn't make them weak. It broke them in a way that revealed their core, their essence, and from that essence, true authority emerged. Spiritual discipline requires a commitment to silence, to listening before acting, to aligning with divine timing instead of rushing with impulse. It is about waking up when you don't feel like it, about praying when you'd rather sleep, about holding your tongue when your ego wants to respond. These choices, when done consistently, begin to realign your inner world. The more you align your inner world, the more powerfully you affect the world around you. Inner alignment means your thoughts match your words match your actions, and your actions serve a higher truth. It means there's no contradiction in your spirit. When people encounter someone who is spiritually aligned, they may not always understand why, but they feel the authority. It is not loud. It does not boast. It simply is. This is the foundation of apostolic influence. When you are aligned, you are dangerous to the enemy not because of your size or strength, but because of your clarity. The enemy thrives in confusion, division, and doubt. A person who is aligned spirit, soul, and body becomes impenetrable to those schemes. There is a reason why people with apostolic authority are often misunderstood, even rejected. Their presence disturbs what is false. Their words cut through deception. Their discipline exposes laziness. Their alignment reveals disorder, and so they often walk alone, but that solitude is part of the refining fire. The wilderness moments are not punishment, they are preparation. You cannot carry spiritual authority if you have not wrestled with yourself. You must confront your own pride, your own fear, your own attachments. You must lose your taste for applause and your craving for validation. Only then can you stand, not as a performer, but as a vessel. The apostles of old were not perfect, but they were surrendered. Their discipline trained them not just to avoid sin, but to discern spirits, not just to quote scripture, but to live it, not just to follow a path, but to become the path others could follow. They weren't just part of a movement, they were the movement. Because they had been emptied of ego and filled with purpose. In spiritual discipline, you realize that not every battle requires your response, not every voice deserves your energy, not every invitation is an assignment. You begin to move with intention, not reaction. You begin to recognize that your life is not your own. It is a tool in the hands of a greater mission. And with that understanding, you are no longer tossed by emotions, opinions, or threats. You are rooted. The storms come, but you do not sway. The criticism rises, but you do not shrink. You are not arrogant, but you are sure. That certainty is what makes you authoritative. Apostolic authority doesn't seek to dominate. It seeks to illuminate. It is not about being above others, but about walking ahead so others can see the way. That leadership can only come from deep discipline. A life without discipline is reactive, scattered, and weak. But a disciplined life, aligned with divine principles, moves with power, precision, and peace. The power to cast out demons, to speak truth into confusion, to lift others from darkness, all of it, flows from the same source. A disciplined life aligned with a higher calling. This is not religious routine. It is not performance. It is the quiet, steady rhythm of someone who has chosen to live from the inside out. Apostles do not chase popularity. They walk in obedience, and in obedience they gain access to authority. That authority is not just for ministry stages. It is for everyday living. It's how you walk into your workplace. It's how you parent your children. It's how you pray when no one is watching. It's how you love when it costs you. Every act of discipline is a seed of authority planted in the soil of your soul. Over time it grows, and when the time comes to speak, to act, or to confront, that authority shows itself not with noise, but with undeniable weight. That is the authority the enemy fears. That is the power darkness cannot mimic. That is the fire that can't be extinguished, and it begins with the quiet, often unseen, discipline of aligning your life with truth. Demons manifest through weakness, distraction, and unchecked emotion. They do not always appear in the dramatic forms people imagine, with visible darkness or terrifying appearances. Most often they arrive quietly, disguised as subtle compromises, temporary indulgences, and unguarded moments of the heart. They wait in the places where discipline has eroded and where the mind has been lulled into passivity. Weakness in this context is not simply physical frailty, but the absence of spiritual structure. When you no longer maintain the boundaries that guard your heart and guide your choices, you leave an opening. Demonic forces take advantage of those openings not with force, but with deception. They twist desires, feed insecurity, and amplify pain. Where there is weakness, they build a throne. The person who does not address their internal fractures becomes vulnerable to external manipulation. Distraction is one of the most common weapons the enemy uses because it appears harmless. A distracted person doesn't notice how their passion has cooled, how their priorities have shifted, how their hunger for righteousness has faded. It doesn't happen overnight. It starts with small detours, a missed prayer, a compromise in integrity, a conversation you entertain when you should walk away, and over time, that distraction becomes a pattern. When your focus is divided, your power is diluted. You cannot fight effectively when your eyes are in 10 different directions. Demons thrive in distraction because it keeps you from seeing clearly. It keeps you chasing shadows instead of confronting truth. You begin to lose your center. You begin to second, guess your calling. You become busy, but not effective. The enemy knows that if he can't destroy you, he will simply keep you distracted long enough that you forget who you are. He will flood your life with noise so you never hear the whisper of conviction. He will offer you everything: fame, wealth, approval. if it means pulling you away from the one thing that matters. Unchecked emotion is another doorway. Emotions themselves are not evil, but when they go unexamined, they become dangerous. Anger, when it's not dealt with, becomes bitterness. Fear, when it's not challenged, becomes bondage. Lust, when it's not controlled, becomes addiction. These emotions create environments where demons can influence behavior. They don't always shout. Sometimes they simply agree with your dysfunction. They feed your offense. They justify your pride. They comfort your resentment. And as you give in to these emotions, you begin to lose your grip on spiritual clarity. You start calling compromise wisdom. You call disobedience freedom. You excuse your silence as peace. But in reality, it's the grip of something dark that has taken root and now disguises itself as your personality. This is how people lose themselves. This is how potential is strangled, not through open rebellion, but through internal chaos that was never addressed. The apostles understood that to walk in power, they had to confront their own weakness, stay fiercely focused, and submit every emotion to the Spirit. This was not optional, it was vital. They didn't just cast out demons in others, they dealt with the battles in their own hearts first. Because the truth is, you can't cast out what you secretly agree with. You can't rebuke what you still embrace in private. You can't confront darkness with authority if that darkness still has a voice in your choices. Many people want to walk in power, but they don't want to go through the purification. They want influence, but not accountability. They want to speak truth, but they don't want to live it when it costs. That gap is where demons operate. They exploit inconsistency. They feast on the gap between your public image and your private reality. This is why inner strength is not a luxury, it is a necessity. You must build a core that cannot be shaken by mood, temptation, or public pressure. That core is forged through time in the presence of God, through reflection, through repentance, and through ruthless honesty with yourself. You have to ask the hard questions. What am I tolerating that I should be confronting? What have I excused in myself that would destroy someone else? Where am I weak but pretending to be strong? This level of self-examination is where deliverance begins. You don't need someone to shout over you to be free. Sometimes you need to sit in silence and face your truth until you break through. That's where demons lose their grip, not because of emotional hype, but because of spiritual clarity. When your inner life is disciplined, focused, and submitted, you become dangerous. Demons recognize authority, and authority doesn't come from volume. It comes from alignment. The ones who carry true authority don't panic in the presence of darkness. They speak, and darkness obeys. Because their life is a reflection of the words they speak, there's no double life, there's no contradiction. That kind of person doesn't just resist temptation, they transform environments. Their very presence shifts atmospheres. But to walk in that level of power, you must make a decision to no longer tolerate the subtle compromises, to no longer be distracted by things that don't matter, and to no longer let your emotions dictate your destiny. You must decide that you will live with focus, with fire, and with discipline. Every day there is a battle, not always with external demons, but with the internal choices that invite them. Will you give your time to what matters or waste it on the meaningless? Will you guard your heart or let anything in? Will you examine your emotions or let them control you? These are the choices that determine whether you walk in freedom or fall into bondage. And the greatest deception is thinking that you're fine when you're not. That's the enemy's favorite tactic, convincing you that compromise is normal, that your weakness is just your personality. that your distraction is just busyness. But deep down, you know when something's off. You feel it, the heaviness, the lack of peace, the confusion. That's the signal, and the moment you recognize it is the moment you can confront it. Demons don't need permission to whisper, but they need agreement to stay. Break that agreement, reject the lie, confront the fear, and declare that your life will no longer be a dwelling place for anything unclean. Choose strength over comfort. Choose discipline over indulgence. Choose focus over distraction. Choose truth over emotion. That's how you win. That's how you walk in the authority you were meant to carry, not just once, every day, until what once tempted you now fears you, until what once controlled you now flees from you, until you become the kind of person that hell regrets ever targeting. Victory begins when you recognize your divine identity and power. Without that recognition, every battle feels like survival, every enemy feels bigger than you, and every failure feels final. But when you awaken to who you truly are in the spiritual realm, the entire atmosphere of your life begins to change. You stop living as a victim of circumstances and start walking as an ambassador of purpose. The enemy's greatest weapon is not in the attacks he launches. It is in the lies he implants. Lies about your worth. Lies about your authority. Lies about your potential. He does not need to chain you physically if he can confuse you mentally and spiritually. That confusion creates hesitation, and hesitation is deadly in spiritual warfare. But when the fog clears, and you finally see yourself through the lens of truth, not as the world defines you, not even as you once defined yourself, but as heaven sees you, then you become a force that darkness cannot ignore. There is no victory for those who do not believe they are meant to win. If you see yourself as ordinary, you will accept defeat as natural. If you believe you are powerless, you will interpret resistance as a sign to quit. The beginning of all breakthrough is a revelation, a moment of clarity where something deeper than knowledge awakens. It is the realization that you are not alone, you are not abandoned, and you are not without strength. You are equipped, you are chosen. You are dangerous to the kingdom of darkness, not because of your personality or your past, but because of the spirit that lives within you. That spirit does not tremble before demons. It does not cower before trials. It does not shrink in the face of storms. It speaks, it commands, and it overcomes, and that same spirit is within you. The problem is not that people lack power. It's that they've forgotten how to access it. Power is not a feeling, it is a position. You do not need to feel powerful to be powerful. You need to know your position. You are seated with Christ in heavenly places. You have been given authority to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy. But what good is authority if you don't use it? What good is identity if you don't claim it? So many people live like spiritual beggars when they are actually heirs. They wait for a sign when they've already been given a command. They wait for a voice from heaven when heaven is waiting for their voice. The authority to shift your atmosphere is in your mouth. The power to resist temptation is in your will. The strength to rise again is in your decision to believe the truth, even when your feelings scream otherwise. Recognizing your divine identity is not arrogance, it is alignment. It means you stop arguing with your purpose and start agreeing with your calling. It means you no longer define yourself by what happened to you, but by what you were created for. There is a war over your identity because your identity determines your capacity. If the enemy can keep you confused about who you are, he can keep you stuck, silent, and small. But the moment you truly remember that you are more than a survivor, more than a name, more than a mistake, You start moving differently. You start praying with boldness. You start standing with strength. You start speaking with fire. That shift in posture is not cosmetic. It's spiritual, and it terrifies the enemy. Your divine identity is not based on your performance. It is rooted in truth that cannot be shaken by failure or rejection. Even on your worst day, you are still called. Even in your deepest pit, you are still known. That kind of identity is not something the world can give you, and therefore it's not something the world can take away. It is eternal, unchanging, and powerful. The more you meditate on that truth, the more your life begins to reflect it. You start expecting victory. You start anticipating breakthrough. You start looking at obstacles not as stop signs, but as training grounds. Because when you understand who you are, you understand that every battle is an opportunity to exercise your authority, to sharpen your discernment, to deepen your faith. Power over the enemy does not mean you will never be attacked. It means you will never be defeated if you stand firm in who you are. Attacks may come, but they will not prosper. Weapons may form, but they will not succeed. The enemy may try to intimidate you, but your identity makes his threats powerless. And it is not enough to know this intellectually. You must internalize it. You must speak it. You must walk in it. Every single day, victory is not a one-time event. It is a lifestyle. It is the consistent application of truth in every situation, especially when it's hard. That consistency builds spiritual momentum, and soon, what once shook you now strengthens you. What once triggered fear now triggers fire. The greatest victories are not won in public. They are won in the secret place. They are won when no one is watching, when you choose truth over temptation, when you choose discipline over comfort, when you choose to worship even when you're weary. That is where power is forged. And when you live from that place, you don't need to chase victory. Victory begins to follow you. Doors open. Chains break. Mountains move. Not because of anything magical, but because you finally aligned your mind with your spirit and your spirit with the truth. You stopped agreeing with the lies of defeat and started declaring the promises of heaven. Recognizing your divine power means refusing to play small. It means you don't apologize for your calling. It means you don't minimize your impact to make others comfortable. It means you stop hiding and start shining. You were never meant to blend in with darkness. You were meant to be a light that exposes it. And when you walk in that light, you give others permission to do the same. You break generational patterns not by force, but by revelation. You shift atmospheres not with your voice, but with your presence. And that presence becomes charged with power when you know exactly who you are and who you represent. Victory begins in the mind, but it is solidified through action. Declare who you are and then act like it, walk like it, pray like it, lead like it, love like it. You have the power not because you feel ready, but because you are chosen. And when you finally believe that with everything in you, there is no demon, no attack, and no lie that can stop what God has put in motion through your life. That is the beginning of lasting, unstoppable, undeniable victory. The enemy loses strength when you walk in unwavering truth and purpose. There is no weapon more powerful against darkness than a life fully anchored in truth and directed by purpose. Truth is not just a set of facts or religious doctrines. It is a force, a presence, a spiritual reality that realigns everything around it. The moment you decide to stop living by impulse, by reaction, by pressure, and instead choose to live by unwavering truth, you shift the spiritual atmosphere. The enemy thrives in confusion, and confusion only exists where truth is absent. When you are unclear about your identity, your mission, your values, and your source of strength, you are vulnerable to every form of spiritual manipulation. But when your life is built on truth that does not bend, the lies of the enemy become powerless. Truth is not always comfortable. It does not always agree with your emotions, your surroundings, or your current situation. But when you choose to live by it anyway, you become unshakable. The enemy cannot manipulate someone who has already made up their mind. He cannot tempt someone who is not negotiating. He cannot deceive someone who is deeply rooted in reality. The reason many people fall is not because they lack strength, but because they are not grounded. Their beliefs shift with pressure, their values collapse under temptation, and their priorities dissolve under stress. But when you know your truth, when it lives in your bones and beats in your heart, nothing can break you. The storm may rage, but you will stand. The fire may burn, but you will endure. Purpose gives direction to your strength. Without purpose, even truth can lie dormant. But when truth and purpose walk hand in hand, you become a weapon in the hands of heaven. Purpose reminds you why you fight, why you endure, why you get back up. It's not enough to know what is true. You must also know why you are here. When you live with purpose, you no longer waste energy on distractions. You no longer give your time to what drains you. You no longer entertain what pulls you backward. Every step you take is calculated. Every decision aligns with your mission. This kind of life is not random, and that's what makes it dangerous to the enemy. He cannot predict or manipulate someone who lives with holy precision. There is no confusion in a purposeful life. Yes, you may have questions, you may have moments of doubt, but at your core you are clear. That clarity is spiritual armor. When the enemy comes with whispers of fear, you answer with purpose. When he offers you shortcuts, you respond with conviction. When he tries to shame you with your past, you confront him with your assignment. That is how you strip him of power, not by shouting louder, but by standing firmer. You refuse to move unless led by truth. You refuse to act unless driven by purpose. That kind of discipline dismantles every scheme of the enemy before it takes root. Most people lose their battles in moments of compromise. They give a little ground here, entertain a small lie there, delay their purpose one more day, and the enemy builds strongholds in those small cracks. But when your truth is unwavering and your purpose unshakable, there are no cracks. You become whole, and wholeness terrifies darkness, because wholeness reflects the image of the one who made you. Wholeness reminds the enemy of his defeat. Wholeness is not perfection, but it is integrity. It is when your outer life matches your inner convictions. It is when you say what you mean, and you mean what you live. That kind of integrity carries a weight that silences demons and opens doors that fear once locked. Walking in truth and purpose does not make life easy. It makes it clear. It won't stop the attacks, but it will prepare you to win. It won't prevent opposition, but it will protect your peace in the midst of it. The enemy loses power every time you choose not to react, but to respond. He loses power every time you forgive when you could have cursed. He loses power every time you serve when you could have hidden. He loses power every time you show up, not for applause, but because your purpose demands it. These are the choices that win spiritual wars, not the loud ones, but the faithful ones. The enemy cannot stand against someone who has resolved to obey no matter the cost. That kind of resolve cannot be manufactured in a moment. It is formed in the secret place, in prayer, in solitude, in surrender. When you lay your desires before truth and submit your plans to purpose, something inside you becomes unbreakable. You develop a strength that does not need validation. You develop a fire that cannot be extinguished. You develop a vision that sees past pain. That is how victory is lived day by day, moment by moment, decision by decision. Truth will challenge you before it strengthens you. It will expose what is false, and that exposure is not always comfortable, but it is necessary, because only what has been revealed can be healed. Only what is brought into the light can be restored. And when you allow truth to do its deep work in you, you emerge purified, clarified, and qualified. You don't just carry words, you carry weight. You don't just speak purpose, you walk it. And the more consistent you become, the weaker your enemy gets. His strategies no longer surprise you. His traps no longer tempt you. His lies no longer linger, because you have seen the truth, and the truth has made you free. Purpose will require sacrifice. It will call you to say no when it would be easier to say yes. It will demand focus in a world of endless options, but the reward is priceless. Purpose brings fulfillment that comfort never will. It gives you strength when motivation fades. It gives you direction when emotions fail. It reminds you that you are not here by accident. You were sent, and if you were sent, then you are supplied. You lack nothing that is required to complete your mission. That assurance makes you dangerous. Because the most dangerous person to darkness is not the loudest. It is the one who knows who they are, why they are here, and where they are going, and refuses to be moved. The enemy loses every time you choose truth. He loses every time you realign with your purpose. He loses when you decide that you will no longer live on the surface, no longer compromise your values, no longer delay your destiny. That decision makes you a threat. That decision makes you unstoppable. That decision sets the atmosphere for heaven to move through you. And once heaven is moving through you, there is no power in hell that can stand against it. This is not just about winning a battle. It is about living a life that makes war on darkness by its very existence, a life built on truth, a life driven by purpose, a life the enemy cannot control, contain, or conquer.